The north is cold and full of whispers.
Castle Black stood like a broken tooth against the white wasteland of the north, its ancient stones black with ice and centuries of wind-worn endurance. Jon Snow stood atop the wall, 700 feet of frozen eternity beneath his boots, and watched the gray dawn break over the haunted forest. He was 14 years old. He'd been a man of the Night's Watch for less than a year. And in the solar below, Lord Commander Jorah Mormont was reading a raven's message that would shatter everything Jon thought he knew about duty and honor. "Jon Snow." The shout came from the courtyard far below. "The old bear wants you." Now, Jon descended the ice-slick stairs with practiced ease, his breath misting in the frigid air. Ghost padded silently beside him. The white direwolf had grown massive in the months since they'd found the pups, larger than any hound, silent as falling snow. The wolf's red eyes tracked everything, missing nothing. The Lord Commander's solar was warm compared to the wall's top, but the warmth did nothing to thaw the ice in Mormont's expression. The old man sat behind his desk, a raven's message clutched in his gnarled hand, his face carved from northern granite. "Sit," Mormont said. Jon sat. Ghost settled at his feet, a warm weight against his leg. "There's news from the south," Mormont began, his voice heavy. "From King's Landing. About your father." Jon's heart stopped. Is father hurt?" "Your father has been arrested for treason," Mormont said bluntly. "Accused of plotting to steal the throne from King Joffrey. He's imprisoned in the black cells awaiting trial." The words didn't make sense. Jon heard them, understood each one individually, but together they formed a sentence too impossible to process. His father, Ned Stark, the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms, arrested for treason. "That's a lie," Jon said. His voice came out flat, certain. "Father would never. He's the hand of the king. He serves Robert." "He would never betray. King Robert is dead," Mormont interrupted. "Killed in a hunting accident. Joffrey sits the Iron Throne now. And the first thing he did was arrest Eddard Stark." Jon's world tilted sideways. Robert dead. Joffrey king. His father in chains. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. "The Lannisters," Jon breathed. "They killed Robert. They're framing father for what the Lannisters did or didn't do doesn't matter to us," Mormont said firmly. "We're the Night's Watch. We take no part in the realm's politics. We serve the wall. We guard against what comes from the north, not what happens in the south." "But father is not our concern?" Mormont's voice was hard but not unkind. "I'm sorry, Jon. Truly. Your father is a good man, but you swore an oath. Night gathers, and now your watch begins. It doesn't end because of southern politics. It doesn't end until your death." Jon stared at the old man, felt the weight of his vows settling on his shoulders like chains. He'd spoken those words before the heart tree, had meant them with everything he was. "I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory." But that oath had been sworn when Ned Stark was handed the king, when honor meant something, when the world made sense. "My brother," Jon said quietly. "Robb, what's he doing?" Mormont's expression flickered. "Your brother has called the northern banners. He's marching south with an army. 20,000 men, the reports say. He means to free your father. 20,000 men. The entire north, rising as one. Robb leading them. Robb, who was only a year older than Jon. Robb, who'd trained beside him in Winterfell's yard, who'd been his best friend and his brother in everything but name. Robb was riding to war, and Jon was trapped at the wall, bound by vows, forbidden from helping. "I want to go to him," Jon said. The words escaped before he could stop them. "No." Mormont's voice was absolute. "You're a brother of the Night's Watch now. Your family is here. Your duty is here. What happens in the south?" "My father is going to die," Jon interrupted, his voice breaking. "Joffrey will execute him. The Lannisters will kill him, and there's nothing. I can't just stand here and do nothing." "You can and you will," Mormont said, "because you swore an oath. Because desertion is punishable by death. Because if you run south, I'll have no choice but to send rangers after you with orders to bring back your head." The threat hung in the air between them. Jon met the Lord Commander's eyes and saw only iron certainty. Mormont wasn't bluffing. The law was the law. Deserters died. "Get out," Mormont said, his voice softening slightly. "Go to your duties." think about what I've said. And Jon, I am sorry. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. Jon left the solar in a daze. Ghost followed him through the castle, past the armory and the training yard and the kitchens where men were preparing the morning meal. Jon saw none of it, heard none of it. His mind churned with impossible thoughts. His father was going to die. Robb was riding to save him. And Jon was here, at the end of the world, sworn to a life of cold and duty and watching his family burn while he did nothing. He found himself in the stables without remembering how he'd gotten there. The horses stamped and snorted in their stalls, their breath steaming. Jon stood among them, his hand resting on a gray mare's neck, and tried to think. The oath was sacred. He'd sworn before the old gods. Breaking it would make him an oath-breaker, a deserter, a man without honor. Everything Ned Stark had taught him said that honor was more important than life itself, but Ned Stark was in chains, about to be executed for a treason he didn't commit, and the oath that bound Jon had been sworn to serve a realm that had just betrayed his father. What was honor worth when the honorable man died in chains? What were vows worth when the kingdom they served was built on lies? Jon's hand tightened on the mare's neck. The horse nickered softly, sensing his distress. He could run, take a horse, ride south, reach Robb's army before the Watch even knew he was gone, fight for his family, fight for his father. Die with a sword in his hand instead of freezing at the wall, useless and bound by vows that meant nothing to the people trying to destroy his family. But if he ran, he was a deserter, an oathbreaker, everything his father had taught him to despise. If he stayed, he was a coward, hiding behind vows while his family died. There was no good choice, no honorable path, just two kinds of damnation. Ghost pressed against his leg, warm and solid and real. The direwolf's red eyes looked up at him, and Jon could have sworn he saw understanding there. Wolves didn't care about oaths, they cared about pack. And Jon's pack was riding to war without him. I don't know what to do, Jon whispered to the wolf. Father would say to keep my vows, to stay here, to serve with honor. But father's the one they're going to kill. And Robb needs me. He's never fought a war. He's going to get himself killed trying to save father, and I could help. The door to the stables opened. Samwell Tarly entered, his round face anxious. Sam had become Jon's closest friend at the wall. Another outcast, another boy who didn't quite fit. Sam was soft and scared, and completely unsuited to the Watch, but he had a good heart. Jon, Sam said quietly. I heard. About your father. I'm so sorry. Jon couldn't speak. If he spoke, something inside him would break. You're thinking about leaving, Sam said. It wasn't a question. Jon looked at him sharply. How did you? Because I know you. You love your family more than anything. You'd do anything for them. Sam moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Jon, if you desert, they'll execute you. Lord Commander Mormont won't have a choice. The law is killing my father. Jon's voice came out harsh, too loud in the quiet stable. The law says Joffrey is king, even though everyone knows he's a bastard born of incest. The law says my father committed treason for trying to do the right thing. Why should I care about the law? Because you're you, Sam said simply. Because you care about honor and duty and keeping your word. Because if you break your oath, you'll never forgive yourself. And if I keep it, I'll never forgive myself for abandoning my family. Jon turned away, pressing his forehead against the mare's neck. I can't win, Sam. No matter what I choose, I lose. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. I think sometimes there is no right choice. Sometimes you just have to decide which wrong you can live with. He paused. But Jon, if you go, if you desert, you need to know that I won't tell anyone. Not for hours. Long enough for you to get away. I owe you that much. Jon looked at his friend, saw the fear in Sam's eyes, the terror of what he was offering. If Sam helped a deserter, he'd be complicit, could be punished. But Sam was offering anyway, because that's what friends did. Thank you, Jon whispered. But I don't know if I can. I don't know. The stable door opened again. This time it was Gren, another friend, another young recruit. His face was pale. Jon, there's another raven, from the south. You need to come, now, the death of honor. They gathered in the Lord Commander's solar again. Jon, Mormont, Maester Aemon. The ancient maester held the new message in trembling hands, his blind eyes staring at nothing. "Read it," Mormont said heavily. Aemon's voice was soft, but clear. "Eddard Stark has confessed to treason. He admitted plotting against King Joffrey and attempting to steal the throne. In his mercy, King Joffrey has sentenced Lord Stark to take the Black and join the Night's Watch. He is to be sent north in chains within the fortnight." Relief crashed over Jon like a wave. His father was alive. Alive, not executed. Sent to the wall instead. He'd be here. They'd be together. It wasn't freedom, but it was life. "There's more," Aemon said quietly. The relief turned to ice in Jon's veins. "King Joffrey has shown mercy to Lord Stark. In gratitude, House Stark must bend the knee and swear fealty. Robb Stark must dismiss his army and return to Winterfell. The king's peace must be restored." Aemon paused. "This is signed by Queen Cersei Lannister, acting as regent." Jon understood immediately. This was a trap. A beautiful, elegant trap. Force Ned to confess. Promise mercy. Use that promise to leverage Robb into surrendering. And if Robb refused to bend the knee, if he kept his army together, they'd kill Ned anyway. Call it justice. Execute him for the confession they'd forced from him. "Your brother faces an impossible choice," Mormont said quietly. "Surrender and trust the Lannisters' mercy, or fight on and guarantee your father's death." "Robb won't surrender," Jon said with absolute certainty. "He can't. If he dismisses his army, the Lannisters will just arrest him too. Kill the whole family. He knows that." "Then your father will die," Aemon said gently, "unless young Robb can win the war before Joffrey loses patience." Jon stared at the ancient maester, Aemon Targaryen, who'd given up a throne to take the Black, who'd lived a century in service to the Wall, who understood duty and sacrifice better than anyone. "What would you do?" Jon asked. "If it was your family, your brother, would you stay here and watch them die?" Aemon was silent for a long moment. His blind eyes seemed to look right through Jon, seeing something beyond sight. "I would stay," he said finally, "because I swore an oath, because duty is heavier than a mountain, and death lighter than a feather, because some vows are more important than blood." He paused. "But I am old, Jon Snow. I've had a lifetime to make peace with my choices. You are young. You have not yet learned that duty and honor are sometimes different things, that the right choice can feel like dying." "This isn't helping," Mormont growled. "Jon, you will not desert. I'm making that an order. You will not leave Castle Black. You will keep your vows. Am I clear?" "Yes, Lord Commander," Jon said automatically. But his mind was already racing, already planning, already choosing which wrong he could live with. That night, Jon lay in his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Around him, other recruits snored and shifted in their sleep. Sam's breathing was soft and rhythmic nearby. Everything was normal. Everything was the same as it had been every night since Jon had taken the Black, except nothing was the same. Everything had changed. In the south, his father sat in a cell, waiting for a mercy that would never come. Robb rode to war with an army at his back, trying to save a man who was already dead, unless Robb could win an impossible victory. Sansa and Arya were hostages in King's Landing, trapped in a nest of vipers. And Jon was here, safe, warm, bound by vows that kept him from helping the people he loved more than life itself. The choice crystallized in that moment, became clear and sharp and inevitable. He could stay here and keep his honor, die an old man at the wall, having served faithfully, having kept his vows, and every day of that long life he'd remember that he'd abandoned his family when they needed him most, that he'd chosen abstract duty over the people who'd loved him and raised him and given him everything good in his life. Or he could go, break his vows, become an oathbreaker and a deserter, die with his honor stained, his name cursed, everything his father taught him about keeping your word shattered. But he'd die fighting for his family. He'd die knowing he'd tried. He'd die as pack, not alone. Some choices weren't really choices at all. Jon rose silently from his bed. Ghost lifted his head, red eyes gleaming in the darkness. Jon touched the wolf's head, and Ghost understood. The dire wolf rose, silent as his name, and followed. Jon had prepared for this, had spent the hours since Aemon's pronouncement making quiet preparations. A pack of supplies hidden in the stables, A good horse already selected, a route mapped in his mind, south through the Gift, then the King's Road, riding hard for the Riverlands, where Robb's army was reportedly gathering. 4 weeks of riding, maybe 5. If he pushed hard, if he was lucky, if the weather held, he could reach his brother before the war's outcome was decided. He dressed quickly in the darkness. His Night's Watch blacks would mark him as a deserter, so he'd packed civilian clothes stolen from Castle Black's stores. A dark cloak, sturdy boots. His sword, not a watchblade but his own, the one Ned had given him before he'd left Winterfell. He couldn't bear to leave it behind. Sam was awake. Jon saw his eyes open in the darkness, saw his friend's expression shift from confusion to understanding to grief. "You're going," Sam whispered. "I have to." "I know." Sam sat up. "I won't tell anyone until morning. I'll say I thought you were on early watch. That should give you—" His voice broke. "That should give you enough time." Jon crossed to his friend, gripped his shoulder. "Thank you. For everything. For being my brother when I needed one." "You're the bravest person I know," Sam said, tears streaming down his face. "The most honorable. Don't let anyone ever tell you different. Not even yourself." Jon couldn't speak, could only nod. Then he turned and left, Ghost padding silently behind him. The castle was quiet. Most of the watch slept. A few guards patrolled the walls, but Jon knew their routes, knew their blind spots. Years of sneaking around Winterfell with Robb and Arya had taught him how to move unseen. The stables were dark and warm. The gray mare nickered softly when Jon entered, recognizing him. He'd chosen her carefully, strong, fast, with good endurance. A horse that could carry him 1,000 miles if he needed. "Easy, girl," Jon whispered, saddling her quickly. "We've got a long ride ahead." His supplies were where he'd hidden them. Food for 2 weeks, dried meat, hard bread, dried fruit, water skins, extra clothes, a small pouch of silver, his savings from a year at the wall meager, but enough to buy food and shelter if needed. And weapons, his sword, a dagger, a bow and quiver of arrows. He was deserting the Night's Watch, yes, but he was riding into a war zone. He'd need to defend himself. Ghost watched him work, the direwolf's red eyes glowing in the stable's darkness. When Jon finished packing, he turned to the wolf. "You should stay," Jon said quietly. "This is going to be dangerous. If they catch me, they'll kill me." "You should." Ghost's growl was soft but absolute. The wolf moved to the stable door, looked back at Jon, and the message was clear. Where Jon went, Ghost went. They were pack. They stayed together. Jon smiled despite everything. "All right. Together then." He led the mare out into the cold night. The wall loomed above them, 700 feet of ice and ancient magic, the barrier that had protected the realm for 8,000 years. Jon was sworn to defend it, sworn to man the walls and guard against what came from the north, and he was abandoning it, riding south, becoming everything he'd been taught to despise. For a moment, doubt crashed over him. Was he making a mistake? Was this dishonor worth it? Would his father forgive him for breaking his vows? Then he thought of Robb, riding to war alone, of Ned, sitting in a cell waiting for execution, of his sisters trapped and afraid in King's Landing. His family needed him. That was all that mattered. Jon mounted the mare, settling into the saddle. Ghost ranged ahead, a white shadow in the darkness. And together, man and wolf rode away from Castle Black, away from the wall, away from honor and duty and everything Jon had thought he was. He was Jon Snow, oathbreaker, deserter, dead man, riding. But he was riding toward his family, toward his pack. And that made him more alive than he'd been in a year. The long road south. The first 3 days of riding were a blur of fear and adrenaline. Jon pushed the mare hard, covering 50 miles a day when a normal rider would manage 30. He rode from before dawn until after dusk, stopping only to rest the horse and grab a few hours of sleep. Ghost ranged beside him, hunting for himself, a silent guardian in the wilderness. They traveled through the Gift, the abandoned land south of the wall that had once been settled but now lay empty. Ruined farmhouses dotted the landscape, their roofs collapsed and their walls overgrown with weeds. The Gift was a haunted place, empty of everything except wind and silence. Jon saw no one, met no travelers. The Gift was too dangerous for casual traffic. Wildlings raided across the wall, and the cold was brutal. Only a fool or a desperate man would travel alone through this waste. Jon was both. On the fourth day, he reached the edge of the gift and entered the northern territories proper. The land here was still wild, still empty, but it had a different quality. Less abandoned, more watched. These were lands under northern jurisdiction, and northern justice applied, which meant if someone recognized him as a Night's Watch deserter, they'd kill him on sight. Jon had changed out of his blacks on the second day, wearing the civilian clothes he'd packed, dark wool and leather, nondescript and unremarkable. He looked like any young traveler, a merchant's son perhaps, or a minor lordling riding to join his family. Not a deserter fleeing south with a price on his head. The King's Road appeared on the fifth day, the great highway that ran from Castle Black all the way to King's Landing, connecting the realm from top to bottom. Jon joined the road with relief. The King's Road was maintained, protected, and most importantly, fast. He could make better time on a real road than picking his way through wilderness, but the road also meant people. Travelers, merchants, anyone who might recognize a 14-year-old boy traveling alone with a direwolf and ask uncomfortable questions. Jon kept to himself. Camped off the road at night, spoke to no one he didn't have to. When he passed travelers, he ducked his head and rode on. Most people ignored him. A young man on horseback was common enough. The direwolf drew stares, but Jon had learned to send Ghost ranging ahead or behind, keeping the wolf out of sight. On the eighth day, Jon reached Moat Cailin. The ancient fortress rose from the swamps of the Neck, a crumbling ruin that had once been the North's greatest stronghold. 3 massive towers still stood, their stones green with moss and age. The moat guarded the only road through the Neck, the causeway that connected the north to the south. And it was garrisoned. Jon saw the banners from a mile away. Northern banners, stark banners, gray direwolves on white fields, snapping in the wind. A force of men, maybe 200, held the moat, controlling passage south. Jon's heart hammered as he approached. These were Robb's men, northern soldiers. If they recognized him, if they knew he was Jon Snow, but why would they know? Jon was just another face, another traveler. He'd left Winterfell a year ago to join the Night's Watch. Most of these soldiers had probably never seen him. He rode toward the gate with his head up, trying to look confident. The guards stopped him with crossed spears. "State your business," one demanded. "Traveling south," Jon said. His voice came out steady despite his racing heart. "To the Riverlands. Family business." The guard studied him. Looked at his horse. Looked at his gear. "You're young to be traveling alone." "I'm 14, old enough to ride." Jon met the man's eyes. "Is there a problem?" "Depends." "Where you from?" Jon had prepared for this question. "White Harbor. My uncle's a merchant. Sent me to check on his warehouses in the Riverlands." It was a plausible lie. White Harbor was the North's major port city. Merchants there did business throughout the realm. A merchant's nephew riding south on business was entirely normal. The guard considered this, then shrugged. "Fine. Road tax is 2 coppers." Jon paid without complaint. The gate opened. He rode through, every muscle tense, waiting for someone to shout, to recognize him, to stop him. No one did. He was through the Neck, through the North's gateway, into the Riverlands proper, and he could breathe again. The days blurred together after that. Jon rode south, always south, following the King's Road as it wound through the Riverlands. The landscape changed gradually, the harsh northern wilderness giving way to gentler terrain, more settlements, more signs of civilization. He passed through villages where people stared at him with suspicious eyes. The Riverlands were at war, caught between northern forces and Lannister armies. Travelers were rare and dangerous. Jon kept moving, never staying long enough for questions. Ghost hunted in the forests beside the road, bringing down rabbits and deer to supplement Jon's dwindling supplies. The direwolf was growing faster than any normal wolf, already the size of a small pony. People who saw Ghost crossed themselves and hurried away. No one wanted to confront a boy with a direwolf at his side. On the 15th day, Jon heard the first rumors of Robb's war. He was stopped at an inn, the first time he'd risked actual contact with people in days. His supplies were gone, his silver nearly spent, and he needed information. The common room was crowded with travelers, all of them talking anxiously about the war. "The young wolf won at Whispering Wood," a merchant said, his voice excited. "Crushed Jaime Lannister's forces. 20,000 men against 8,000, and the Starks won in an hour. Captured the Kingslayer himself, Jon's heart soared. Robb had won. His brother had actually won a major battle. Aye, but it won't last, another man said darkly. Tywin Lannister's bringing his full army. 40,000 men, the biggest host in the Riverlands. The Starks are brave, but they can't win against those numbers. Where is the Stark army now? Jon asked, speaking for the first time. The men looked at him, studied his young face, his travel-worn clothes. Riverrun, the merchant said, holding the castle with the Tullys. Why? You got business with the king in the north? My brother serves in his army, Jon lied. I'm trying to reach him. Well, you better hurry then. Word is the Lannisters are massing at Harrenhal. There'll be another battle soon, maybe the last one. The merchant shook his head. This war's going to drown the Riverlands in blood before it's done. Jon left the inn with his mind racing. Riverrun. Robb was at Riverrun, maybe 2 weeks' ride ahead. If Jon pushed hard, if he rode dawn to dusk, he could reach his brother. Finally reach him. Join the army. Fight at Robb's side. The thought drove him harder. He rode longer each day, pushing the mare to her limits. Ghost ranged tirelessly beside him, the direwolf's red eyes scanning the countryside for threats. On the 20th day, Jon saw smoke on the horizon, black plumes rising from burning villages. The aftermath of battle. He rode past scorched fields and burned-out farmhouses, past corpses left to rot on the roadside. The war wasn't an abstract thing anymore. It was here, real, bloody. A patrol of soldiers appeared ahead, men in Lannister red, their armor gleaming. Jon's hand went to his sword, but there were a dozen of them, and one of him. Fighting was suicide. He turned off the road, urging the mare into the forest. The soldiers shouted after him, but they didn't pursue. They had better things to do than chase one boy. Jon rode through the forest for hours, paralleling the road but staying hidden. When he emerged, the Lannister patrol was gone. But he'd lost time, lost his way. And now he was deep in hostile territory with enemy soldiers on every road. This was going to be harder than he'd thought. The meeting Jon reached the outskirts of Riverrun. On the 27th day of his journey, the castle stood at the confluence of two rivers, the Red Fork and the Tumblestone, their waters meeting in a delta before flowing into the Greater Trident. Riverrun was ancient and strong, its red sandstone walls rising from the water, its gates guarded by men in Tully armor, and surrounding it, camped across the fields and riverbanks, was Robb's army. 20,000 men, maybe more. Tents stretched to the horizon, organized in neat rows with banners flying above each company. Grey direwolves for House Stark, the broken chains of House Glover, the battle axe of House Serwyn, the Umber Giant, the Karstark Sunburst. The North had come to war. Jon sat on his exhausted horse and stared at the encampment, his heart pounding. He'd made it. Against all odds, across 1,000 miles of hostile territory, he'd reached his brother's army. Now came the hard part. He couldn't just ride up to the gates and announce himself. If Robb's officers recognized him as a Night's Watch deserter, they might arrest him on the spot, or worse, execute him as an oathbreaker before he could even speak to Robb. He needed to reach his brother directly, privately, before anyone else could interfere. Ghost materialized from the forest beside him, the direwolf's white fur streaked with dirt from the journey. Jon looked down at his companion. "We need to be smart about this," Jon said quietly. "If we're caught," Ghost growled softly. The message was clear. They wouldn't be caught. Jon dismounted and led his horse into the forest, away from the road. He needed to approach the camp from an unexpected direction, somewhere the sentries wouldn't be watching as closely. He circled wide, moving through the trees parallel to the encampment. Ghost ranged ahead, the direwolf's instincts guiding them around patrols and sentries. Jon had never been so grateful for the wolf's presence. As dusk fell, Jon found what he was looking for, a small stream that fed into the river, its banks overgrown with brush and trees, a natural blind spot in the camp's perimeter. He tied his horse in the forest and moved forward on foot, Ghost beside him. The camp was massive up close. Thousands of men moving between tents, cooking fires burning, weapons being sharpened and armor repaired. The air smelled of smoke and horses and too many people living too close together. Jon pulled his hood up and moved through the camp like he belonged there. Just another soldier, just another face in the crowd. No one looked at him twice. except when they saw Ghost. Then they stared, crossed themselves, hurried away. The direwolf's presence was both a blessing and a curse. It marked Jon as unusual, but it also made people avoid him. He needed to find Robb's tent. The king in the north would be at the camp's center, surrounded by guards and officers. Jon moved in that direction, his heart hammering. Ghost pressed against his leg. "You there?" a voice barked. "Boy, what's your business?" Jon turned. A sergeant in stark colors approached, his hand on his sword. "I'm looking for—" Jon started. Then, a different voice cut through the air. Familiar. Impossible. "Jon?" He turned, and there, emerging from between tents, was Robb Stark. His brother, his king. The boy Jon had grown up with, trained with, loved like blood, except Robb wasn't a boy anymore. He was taller, broader, with a circlet of hammered bronze on his head, a crown. His face had aged in the year they'd been apart, hardened by command and responsibility. But his eyes were the same. Gray as a winter sky, Stark eyes, and they were wide with shock. "Jon," Robb said again, his voice breaking. "Seven hells, is that really you?" Jon couldn't speak, could only stare at his brother, at the king Robb had become. Then Robb closed the distance between them and pulled Jon into a fierce embrace. "You're here," Robb breathed. "You're actually here. How, when did you—" He pulled back, studying Jon's face. "Did father send you? Did the watch give you leave to—" "I deserted," Jon said quietly. The words fell like stones. Robb's expression shifted from joy to confusion to shock. "You what?" "I deserted the night's watch. I rode south to join you. To fight for father, for the family." Jon met his brother's eyes. "I broke my vows, Robb. I'm an oathbreaker, a deserter. If the watch catches me, they'll execute me. But I couldn't. I couldn't stay there while you fought alone." While father, his voice broke. Robb stared at him and Jon couldn't read his expression. Was it anger? Disappointment? Would Robb turn him away? Send him back? Then Robb pulled him into another embrace. This one even fiercer. "You idiot," Robb said, his voice rough with emotion. "You brave, stupid, loyal idiot. You broke your vows for me." "For the family," Jon corrected. "For the pack." "The pack?" Robb echoed. He pulled back, his hands on Jon's shoulders. "How long have you been riding?" 27 days. From Castle Black to here. Alone? Ghost was with me." Robb looked down at the direwolf, seeing the massive white wolf for the first time. "Gods, he's grown. So has Grey Wind, I'd wager. You'd win that wager." Robb's smile was brief, then his expression turned serious. "Jon, you can't let anyone know you're here. Not yet. If word gets out that I'm harboring a deserter—" "I know. I understand. I needed to help, needed to fight. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Command me and I'll obey. I'm yours, brother. However you need me." Robb looked at him for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "Come with me. We need to talk. Privately." He led Jon through the camp, moving quickly, avoiding clusters of soldiers. They reached a large tent at the camp's center, the command tent, flying Stark banners. Guards stood at the entrance, but Robb waved them back. "No one enters," he commanded. "I'm not to be disturbed." Inside, the tent was simply furnished, a table covered in maps, a camp bed, armor hanging on a stand, the trappings of war, nothing more. And standing by the table, studying a map, was Catelyn Stark. Jon's breath caught, his father's wife. The woman who'd hated him his entire life, who'd never hidden her disgust at his presence, who'd made his childhood a careful dance of avoiding her anger. She looked up as they entered, saw Jon, and her face went white. "Jon Snow," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" The price of brotherhood. The silence in the command tent stretched like a bowstring pulled to breaking. Catelyn Stark stood frozen, her eyes locked on Jon, her expression a careful mask that couldn't quite hide the shock beneath. "Mother," Robb said carefully, "Jon has ridden from the wall to join us. 27 days alone through enemy territory. He's here to help." "He's a deserter," Catelyn said flatly. "An oathbreaker. Do you understand what this means? What harboring him will do to our cause if it becomes known?" "I understand perfectly." Robb's voice was calm but firm. "And I don't care. He's my brother. He's pack. He stays. Caitlyn's jaw tightened. She looked at Jon, really looked at him, taking in his travel-worn clothes, his exhausted face, the dire wolf standing at his side. Her expression was impossible to read. Why? She asked finally. Why did you desert? The Night's Watch is sacred. Those vows are for life. What could possibly justify father is in a dungeon waiting to die? Jon interrupted. His voice came out harder than he intended. Robb is fighting a war alone. My sisters are hostages. The family needed me more than the wall did. But the family, Catelyn repeated. Her tone was strange. You consider yourself family. It was a statement, not a question. Jon felt the old familiar sting, the reminder that he was a bastard, that he didn't truly belong, that Catelyn had never wanted him and never would. He is family, Robb said before Jon could respond. He's my brother. That's all that matters. Catelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured, careful. I'm not denying his blood relation to you, Robb. I'm questioning the wisdom of allowing a deserter, a boy with a price on his head, to stay in this camp. If your bannermen learn of this, if word spreads, then we'll deal with it, Robb said. But I'm not sending him away. I won't. Mother and son stared at each other. Jon stood between them, feeling like a stone that might tip the balance one way or another. He'd expected Caitlyn's hostility, had braced for it. But something in her expression was different from the cold hatred he remembered. She was calculating now, thinking, not just reacting from wounded pride. Finally, Caitlyn sighed. If he stays, it must be secret. He cannot be acknowledged as Jon Snow, cannot be recognized as a deserter from the Watch. The lords would demand his execution, Lord Karstark especially. Rickard is a hard man who believes in law and justice. He would see harboring an oathbreaker as dishonor. Then we give Jon a different identity, Robb said. A name. A story. What story? Caitlyn asked. He has your face, Robb. The same gray eyes. The same dark hair. Anyone who looks at him will see Stark blood. Not if he's a distant cousin, Jon said quietly. Both of them turned to look at him. There are Stark cousins scattered through the north. Cadet branches. Distant relations. I could be one of them. Jon Stone, a bastard cousin from a minor branch of the family, here to serve the king. Caitlyn studied him. That might work. Bastards are common enough. And your training. You were at the Night's Watch for a year. You know sword work, tactics, survival skills. You could serve as a scout, Robb said. A ranger. Jon's good in the wilderness. He could lead reconnaissance patrols, gather intelligence, keep him away from the main camp where too many people might recognize him. And the dire wolf? Caitlyn gestured to Ghost. That creature marks him as unusual. People will ask questions. Let them ask, Robb said. Plenty of northerners have bonds with animals. It's strange but not impossible. We'll say he found the wolf as a pup, raised it, which is true, Jon added. Caitlyn looked between them, her expression still unreadable. Finally, she nodded slowly. Very well. Jon Stone, bastard cousin of House Stark, serving as a scout and ranger in the king's army. That's his identity. That's who he is, to everyone except the three of us in this tent. She fixed Jon with a hard stare. But understand this. If you're discovered, if your true identity becomes known, I cannot protect you. Robb cannot protect you. The lords will demand justice, and we'll have no choice but to give it to them. Your life depends on maintaining this deception. Am I clear? Yes, my lady, Jon said. Good. Caitlyn turned back to her maps. Now leave us. Robb and I have strategy to discuss. We'll send for you when we have an assignment. It was a dismissal. Jon bowed slightly and turned to go, but Robb caught his arm. Wait in my personal tent, Robb said quietly. The one behind this. I'll come find you when we're done. We have a lot to talk about. Jon nodded and left, Ghost padding silently beside him. As he stepped out of the command tent, he heard Catelyn's voice, low and sharp. This is a mistake, Robb. That boy is a liability we cannot afford. That boy is my brother, Robb replied. And I need him. Jon didn't wait to hear more. He found Robb's personal tent, smaller than the command tent but still well appointed, and collapsed onto a camp stool. The exhaustion of 27 days of hard riding crashed over him all at once. His body ached. His mind felt fuzzy. Ghost curled up at his feet, the direwolf's red eyes watching the tent entrance. Jon rested his hand on the wolf's head and tried to process what had just happened. He'd made it. He was here. Robb had accepted him. More than accepted, had defended him against Catelyn's objections. But the price was clear. Jon Snow no longer existed. He was Jon Stone now. A different person. A lie. For the first time since leaving Castle Black, Jon let himself wonder if he'd made the right choice. The king's brother Robb returned an hour later, looking tired but determined. He carried 2 plates of food, roasted chicken, bread, cheese. He handed one to Jon. "Eat," Robb commanded. "You look half dead." Jon ate. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the food touched his lips. Then he devoured it like a starving wolf. Robb watched him with a slight smile. "When was the last time you had a real meal?" "The inn, 15 days ago." Jon swallowed a mouthful of bread. "I ran out of supplies after that. Been living on what Ghost could hunt. 7 hells." Robb shook his head. "You rode 1,000 miles through enemy territory with no food and no support. That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the stupidest." "Probably both," Jon admitted. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Robb set his plate aside and looked at Jon seriously. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. When you learned about Father. Why you decided to desert. How you made it here." So Jon told him. About the ravens that brought news of Ned's arrest. About Mormont's orders to stay at the wall. About the second message announcing Ned's confession and the impossible choice it created. About the night he'd left Castle Black with Ghost and nothing else. He told Robb about the journey south. The fear of pursuit. The close calls with Lannister patrols. The burned villages and the rumors of war. About pushing himself and his horse to the breaking point, driven by the need to reach his brother before it was too late. Robb listened without interrupting. When Jon finished, his brother was quiet for a long moment. "You gave up everything," Robb said finally. "Your vows. Your honor. Your place in the world. You made yourself an outlaw for me." "For the family," Jon corrected. "For Father. For you. For the pack." "The pack," Robb echoed. He stood and paced the tent. "Jon, you need to understand something. The war, it's not going well. We won at the Whispering Wood. Captured Jaime Lannister himself. But that was one battle. The Lannisters have more men, more gold, more everything. Tywin is massing his forces at Harrenhal, 40,000 men. We have 20,000. The math doesn't favor us." "Then why are we still fighting?" Jon asked. "Because we can't stop." Robb's voice was bitter. "If I surrender, the Lannisters will execute Father anyway. They'll probably execute me too. Definitely take my head and put it on a spike as a warning to anyone else who thinks about rebelling. Our only chance is to win. Actually win. Beat Tywin in the field, take King's Landing, put Joffrey's head on a spike instead of mine. Can we do that? Honestly, I don't know." Robb stopped pacing and looked at Jon. "But having you here, having someone I trust absolutely, someone who knows me, someone I can rely on, that helps. It helps more than you know." Jon felt warmth spread through his chest. "What do you need me to do? Right now? Rest. You've been riding for a month. You're exhausted. Sleep. Recover. Then we'll talk about how to use your skills." Robb paused. "But Jon, Mother was right about one thing. You need to be careful. The Northern Lords are proud men with strong opinions about honor and oaths. If they learn you're a deserter, many of them will demand your execution. Even knowing you're my brother might not save you." "I understand, do you?" Robb's voice was intense. "Lord Karstark lost 2 sons in the war already. He's grief-stricken and angry and looking for someone to blame. If he learns I'm harboring an oathbreaker, he'll see it as a stain on our cause. The great Jon Umber is loyal, but he's also a hard man who believes deserters should hang. Even the lords who like me personally might turn against me if they think I'm putting sentiment above law." "Then I'll stay hidden," Jon said. "I'll be Jon Stone. A scout, a ranger, someone who stays in the shadows and doesn't draw attention." "Good." Robb moved to the tent entrance, then paused. "Jon, thank you. For coming. For risking everything. I know what it cost you, and I know you did it for Father. For the family. But selfishly, I'm glad you're here. I've been carrying this weight alone for months. It's good to have you back. I'm glad to be here too," Jon said quietly. Robb left. Jon sat alone in the tent, exhaustion pulling at him like a tide. He lay down on a camp bed, the first real bed he'd slept in since leaving Castle Black, and closed his eyes. Ghost settled beside the bed, the direwolf's breathing slow and steady. Jon rested his hand on the wolf's head and let sleep take him. He dreamed of the wall, of ice and cold and ancient vows spoken before heart trees, of Maester Aemon's blind eyes staring at him with disappointment, of Jorah Mormont shaking his head sadly. You broke your oath, boy. You dishonored everything we stand for. You deserve death. Jon woke with a start, sweat on his brow despite the cool night air. Ghost was standing, ears pricked, staring at the tent entrance. Someone was coming. Jon's hand went to his sword, then he relaxed as Robb entered, Grey Wind at his heels. The two dire wolves regarded each other for a moment, then Ghost relaxed. Pack, recognized Pack. Couldn't sleep either? Robb asked. Bad dreams. I get those too. Robb sat on the edge of the bed. Grey Wind settled beside Ghost, and the two massive wolves created a warm presence in the tent. Want to talk about it? Jon shook his head. Just the weight of what I did, what it means. Regrets? Some. But not about coming here. Not about that. Jon looked at his brother. Tell me about the war. Really tell me? What's our situation? Robb was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. He laid out the military situation with brutal honesty. The battles won and lost, the alliances forged and broken, the constant struggle to keep the Northern Lords united behind a boy king barely 15 years old. He told Jon about the Freys, Walder Frey, who controlled the twins, the vital crossing between North and South, and who demanded a high price for his support. He wants me to marry one of his daughters, Robb said, his voice disgusted. When the war is won. As payment for his loyalty. I agreed because I had no choice. We needed to cross the twins. But Jon, have you seen his daughters? There are dozens of them. And most of them look like him, weasel-faced and mean. It's a political marriage, Jon said. Father made one. Married mother for alliance, not love. It worked out. Did it? Robb's voice was sharp. I saw how father and mother were together. They respected each other. Maybe even loved each other eventually. But it took years. And there was always... He stopped. Always me, Jon finished quietly. The bastard father brought home, the stain on their marriage. I didn't mean. It's true. Jon managed to smile. But Robb, you're a king now. Kings make sacrifices. If marrying a Frey girl keeps the alliance strong, you do it. You can learn to love her, or at least tolerate her. I suppose. Robb didn't look convinced. There's something else. Something I haven't told anyone yet. Jon waited. Theon, Robb said finally. I sent him to the Iron Islands, to negotiate with his father Balon, to get the Ironborn fleet on our side. Jon's stomach sank. Robb, that's dangerous. The Greyjoys rebelled against father 10 years ago. They lost. Theon was taken as a hostage to ensure their loyalty. Sending him back, I know, but we need ships. We need to open a second front against the Lannisters. And Theon is my friend. I trust him. Robb's voice was defensive. He's lived with us for 10 years. He's basically a Stark. Theon is a Greyjoy, Jon said carefully. His father is Balon Greyjoy. His home is Pike. He might be your friend, but he's also an Ironborn prince who was taken from his family as a child. Robb, people like that, they don't forget. They don't forgive. You sent him back to the people who view him as a stolen son. What do you think he'll do? He'll convince Balon to support us, Robb said firmly. He gave me his word. Jon wanted to argue more, wanted to tell his brother that this was a mistake, that Theon's loyalty was divided at best and treacherous at worst. But Robb's expression was set. He'd made his decision. When did he leave? Jon asked instead. 2 weeks ago. We should hear something soon. Jon filed that information away. 2 weeks meant Theon was probably at Pike by now, meeting with Balon, making whatever deal he'd make. And if Jon's instincts were right, if Theon chose blood over adopted brotherhood, Winterfell was vulnerable. Robb's home base, the heart of the North. If the Ironborn raided while Robb's army was south, has anyone sent word to Winterfell? Jon asked. Warned them to be ready? Increased the garrison? Why would we? Winterfell is safe. We hold the North. The Ironborn wouldn't dare. The Ironborn raid and reave. That's what they do. And Winterfell is undefended right now because you took all your fighting men south. If Theon betrays you, if he tells Balon where the weaknesses are, Theon won't betray me, Robb said, but his voice was less certain now. I hope you're right, Jon said quietly. But Robb bade, send a raven, tonight. Tell whoever's holding Winterfell to increase patrols, to watch the coast, just in case. Robb looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll send word. Can't hurt to be careful. They talked for another hour. About the war, about their sisters still trapped in King's Landing, about their father languishing in the black cells. Finally, exhaustion claimed them both. Robb left to get a few hours of sleep before dawn councils and strategy sessions. Jon lay back down, ghost warm against his leg, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The scout's duty, Jon spent the next week learning the rhythms of Robb's war camp. As Jon Stone, he was assigned to reconnaissance duties under the command of a grizzled ranger named Daisy Mormont, a woman warrior from Bear Island, tall and strong with a sharp tongue and sharper sword. She looked at Jon skeptically when he was introduced. A bastard cousin, she said flatly. How convenient, and you claim to have tracking skills. I served with the Night's Watch, Jon said, before I left to serve the king. The Night's Watch doesn't release men easily. How'd you get out? I didn't serve long, only a few months. Decided I'd rather fight for a living king than freeze on the wall. The lie came smoothly. Jon had practiced it. Daisy studied him. And the wolf? Ghost sat at Jon's feet, red eyes watching her calmly. The dire wolf had grown even larger in the month since leaving Castle Black. Nearly 5 feet at the shoulder now, massive and intimidating. Found him as a pup. Raised him. He's loyal. He better be. If that beast turns on anyone in this camp, I'll put an arrow through his skull myself. But Daisy was smiling slightly. All right, Jon Stone. Let's see if you can actually track or if you're just another lordling playing at soldier. She took him into the forests around River Run and tested him relentlessly. Could he identify tracks? Follow a trail? Move silently through undergrowth? Read weather signs? Predict enemy movements based on terrain? Jon passed every test. His year at the wall had taught him wilderness survival, and his natural aptitude for tactics helped him think like an enemy scout. By the end of the week, Daisy was nodding approval. You'll do, she said. You're green, but you've got good instincts. And that wolf of yours is useful. I've never seen anything move so quietly for something so damn big. Jon was assigned to a scouting party, a dozen rangers who rode ahead of the main army, mapping terrain and watching for enemy movements. It was dangerous work. Lannister forces controlled much of the Riverlands, and scouts who got caught were usually killed on sight. But it kept Jon away from the main camp, away from the lords who might recognize him, away from questions about his identity. He learned quickly that war was nothing like the songs made it sound. There was no glory in riding through burned villages, no honor in finding the bodies of small folk slaughtered by raiders, no beauty in the work of scouting. Just cold, wet nights sleeping in forests, constant fear of ambush, and the grinding awareness that death could come from any direction. But he was good at it. His year at the wall had prepared him for hardship, and Ghost's senses gave him an edge other scouts lacked. The dire wolf could smell enemies before Jon saw them, could hear movement through the forest that human ears missed. After 2 weeks, Jon had earned the respect of the other scouts. They stopped questioning his presence, started trusting his judgment. One of them, a young man named Olyvar Frey, one of Walder Frey's countless sons, even became something like a friend. You fight well for a bastard, Olyvar said one evening as they made camp. Most highborn bastards I've met are either apologetic or aggressive. You're just competent. I don't have anything to prove, Jon said. I know what I am. I'm fine with it. Wish more people were like that. Olyvar poked at their fire. My father has so many bastards he can't even count them all. Most of them are bitter about not being legitimate. Makes them do stupid things. Jon thought about that, about how his own bastardy had defined his childhood, how Catelyn's hatred had shaped him, how he'd internalized the shame until it became part of who he was. Being a bastard isn't the worst thing you can be, Jon said quietly. Being dishonorable is worse. Being cruel is worse. Being a coward is worse. That's a mature perspective for someone our age, Olyvar observed. How old are you anyway? 15? 14. Huh. I'm 16. You seem older. Olyvar studied him. It's the eyes. You've got old eyes. like you've seen things most people haven't. Maybe I have, Jon said. They lapsed into comfortable silence. Ghost appeared from the darkness, a dead rabbit in his jaws. The direwolf dropped it at Jon's feet. Dinner, hunted fresh. That wolf is unnatural, Oliver said, but his tone was admiring. I've never seen anything like him. White as snow, big as a horse, and smart as a person. Where'd you really find him? North, Jon said. Beyond the wall. You were beyond the wall? Olivar's eyes widened. What's it like up there? Cold, empty, full of things that want to kill you. Jon skinned the rabbit efficiently, but beautiful too. In a harsh way. The wall itself is... He stopped. Jon Snow wouldn't have seen the wall up close. Wouldn't have stood atop it and stared into the endless frozen north. Is what? Oliver prompted. Is something I'd like to see someday, Jon finished lamely. If Oliver noticed the slip, he didn't mention it. The Jane Westerling problem. The news came on a quiet morning 3 weeks after Jon's arrival. Winterfell had fallen. A raven arrived at dawn, its message brief and devastating. Theon Greyjoy had betrayed House Stark, seized Winterfell with a force of Ironborn raiders, and proclaimed himself Prince of Winterfell. Bran and Rickon were reportedly dead, killed by Theon or killed escaping, the message wasn't clear. Jon heard the news from Daisy Mormont, who pulled him aside after morning drills. The king wants to see you, she said quietly. In his tent. Privately, Jon, it's bad. Really bad. Jon's stomach dropped. He'd warned Robb, had told him to increase Winterfell's garrison. But had the warning come too late? Or had Robb dismissed it entirely? He found Robb's tent and entered to find chaos. His brother sat at the campaign table, his face ashen, a crumpled message in his hand. Catelyn stood nearby, her own face pale with grief. The great Jon Umber paced like a caged bear. Lord Karstark looked murderous. Theon, Robb said when he saw Jon. His voice was hollow. Theon took Winterfell, killed my brothers, declared himself a prince. He looked up, and Jon saw devastation in his eyes. You were right. You warned me, and I didn't listen. I thought he was my friend. I trusted him. Jon crossed to his brother, knelt beside his chair. Robb, Bran and Rickon are dead, Robb said. My little brothers. I should have been there. Should have protected them. You were here fighting the war you had to fight, Jon said firmly. You couldn't have known Theon would betray you. That's on him, not you. The bastard will pay, the great Jon growled. We'll march north, retake Winterfell. Put Greyjoy's head on a spike. We can't, Catelyn said, her voice thick with grief. We can't divide our forces. The Lannisters would crush us. We have to... She stopped, tears streaming down her face. Gods, my boys, my sweet boys. Jon stood, looked at the assembled lords. What's the plan? What are we doing? There is no plan, Lord Karstark said bitterly. The king sits here paralyzed by grief while enemies close in from all sides. We should march north, retake our home, show the Ironborn what happens when they steal from the north, and abandon the war in the south? Robb's voice was sharp now. Leave father to die? Leave Sansa and Arya in Lannister hands? We can't save everyone, my lord. We have to choose. Then choose. Karstark slammed his fist on the table. But choose like a king, not a grieving boy. The tent fell silent. Robb stared at Karstark, and Jon saw something crystallize in his brother's expression. Saw the boy being forcibly buried under the weight of kingship. We stay here, Robb said quietly. We finish the war against the Lannisters. We rescue father and the girls. Then, and only then, we deal with Theon and the Ironborn. He looked at each lord in turn. That's my decision. As your king. The lords exchanged glances. Finally, they nodded. One by one, they filed out of the tent, leaving Robb alone with Jon and Catelyn. Robb buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Catelyn moved to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, but she was crying too. Jon stood awkwardly, not sure what to do. He wasn't really family, not acknowledged family. Catelyn barely tolerated his presence. This was a moment for true family, not bastard cousins. But Robb looked up, saw him standing there, and reached out. Stay, Robb said. Please. I need both of you here. Mother? Jon. So Jon stayed. He stood beside his brother and his king, and they grieved together for the boys who died and the home that was lost. It was hours later, after Catelyn had finally left to rest, that Robb spoke again. "I have to marry a Frey," he said dully. "That's still the plan. Keep the alliance strong. Walder Frey will want the marriage sooner rather than later. Wants to make sure I don't back out." "It's just a marriage," Jon said. "You can endure it." "Can I?" Robb looked at him. "Jon, I've been fighting this war for months, watching men die, making impossible decisions, carrying the weight of thousands of lives. The one thing I thought I had was the right to choose my own wife eventually. After the war, and now even that's being taken from me." "Dad, you're a king," Jon said gently. "Kings don't get to choose. They do what's necessary for their people." I know that, but..." Robb stopped. "There's something I haven't told you. About a girl. Jane Westerling." Jon's instincts prickled. "Who is she?" "A Westerling. Minor nobility. We took their castle in the Westerlands campaign. She helped tend my wounds after a battle. She was kind, gentle. Everything this war isn't." Robb's voice softened. "I think I love her, Jon." Every warning bell in Jon's mind started clanging. "Robb, no. You can't. You're promised to a Frey. If you break that oath..." I know what it would mean. But Jon, I'm 15 years old. I'm tired of duty and sacrifice and watching people die. When I'm with Jane, I forget about the war for a few hours. I forget about the weight of the crown. I feel like myself again." "That's exactly why you can't marry her," Jon said urgently. "Robb, listen to me. Breaking the Frey betrothal would be a disaster. Walder Frey would pull his support. We'd lose the twins, lose the crossing. The northern and river forces would be cut off from each other. The Lannisters would exploit it immediately." "I know the military consequences," Robb said sharply. "Don't you think I've thought about this? But Jon, what if duty isn't enough? What if I need something to fight for, beyond just survival? Jane makes me want to live through this war, want to build something after." Without her, you're still a king with a responsibility to your people," Jon interrupted. "Robb, I understand what you're feeling. I do. But you cannot let one girl, no matter how much you care for her, destroy everything you've built. Father married mother for duty. It wasn't love at first, but he honored his commitment, and eventually it became real. You can do the same with a Frey daughter." Robb was quiet for a long moment. "You sound like father. Like duty is the only thing that matters." "It's not the only thing," Jon said, "but sometimes it's the most important thing. And right now, with the war balanced on a knife's edge, your duty is more important than your heart." "And what about your duty?" Robb asked quietly. "You deserted the Night's Watch for me, for the family. You broke your sacred vows. How is that different from me breaking a betrothal for love?" The question hit like a physical blow. Jon had no answer. Because Robb was right. Jon had broken his own vows for family, for love. Who was he to tell Robb not to do the same? "The difference," Jon said slowly, "is that when I broke my vows, I knew the price. Knew I was making myself an oathbreaker and a criminal. Knew I'd probably die for it. But I accepted that cost because saving you mattered more than my honor." He met Robb's eyes. "If you marry Jane, are you prepared to accept the cost? Are you prepared to lose the Freys? Potentially lose the war? Potentially get thousands of people killed, all for one girl? Because that's what you're choosing." Robb looked away. "I don't know. I don't know if I'm strong enough to give her up." "Then you need to decide," Jon said, "before you do something you can't take back. Before you sleep with her or make promises you can't keep. Decide now while you still can. Duty or desire? Survival or love? King or boy?" "That's not fair," Robb whispered. "No," Jon agreed. "It's not. But it's the choice you have." Robb stood and paced the tent, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, he stopped and looked at Jon. "If I marry a Frey, will you stand with me, be there at the wedding? Help me get through it?" "Of course. Always." "And if I marry Jane?" Jon was quiet. "Then, I'll still stand with you, but Robb, I'll also watch thousands of men die because of your choice. Watch the North fall. Watch everything Father built crumble. And I'll know it was because you chose one girl over all of them." It was harsh. Brutal, but it was the truth. Robb sat down heavily. I hate this. I hate being king. I hate having to choose between happiness and duty. I hate that everyone's life depends on my decisions. I know, Jon said. But you are the king, and that means making the choices no one else wants to make. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Robb spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. I'll think about what you said, about the consequences. About duty. He looked at Jon. For being honest, for not just telling me what I want to hear. That's what brothers do, Jon said. Brothers? Robb repeated. He managed a small smile. I'm glad you're here, Jon. Even if you are a deserter and an oath breaker and technically a criminal, I'm still glad you're here. Me too, Jon said. But as he left the tent and returned to his own quarters, Jon felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. He'd given Robb good advice, the right advice. But would his brother take it? Or would love and grief and the desperate need for something good in the middle of all this horror override his judgment? Jon didn't know, and that uncertainty terrified him more than any Lannister army. The Battle of the Fords 2 weeks later, Jon got his answer. Robb announced his engagement to one of Walder Frey's daughters, a girl named Roslyn, reportedly one of the less weasel-faced options. The marriage would take place after the war, once victory was secured, and Robb could properly celebrate with his bride. Jon felt relief crash over him. Robb had chosen duty, had chosen survival, had made the hard choice. But something in his brother's eyes looked broken, like a piece of him had died to make that choice. You did the right thing, Jon told him privately. Did I? Robb's voice was hollow. Or did I just postpone the inevitable? Because, Jon, I still love her. I still want her. Agreeing to marry a Frey doesn't change that. Then you don't see Jane again, Jon said firmly. You stay away from her. You focus on the war. You do what kings have done for thousands of years. You put your personal desires aside for the good of your kingdom. You make it sound simple. It is simple, not easy. But simple. Jon gripped his brother's shoulder. You're strong enough for this, Robb. I know you are. Robb nodded, but he didn't look convinced. The war continued. Tywin Lannister's forces massed at Harrenhal, but they didn't attack. Instead, Tywin seemed content to hold his position and wait for the North to make a mistake. Robb, advised by his mother and the Northern Lords, devised a new strategy. They would strike at the Lannister supply lines, harass their foraging parties, cut off their provisions, starve them out rather than meet them in open battle. It was smart, cautious, the kind of strategy that could work if they had time. But then word came from King's Landing. Ned Stark had been executed. Not sent to the wall as promised, not held as a hostage for good behavior. Executed. Beheaded on the steps of the Sept of Baelor by Joffrey's personal order, his head mounted on a spike as a warning to all who opposed the crown. Jon heard the news from Daisy Mormont. She found him in the scouting camp, her face grim. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Your king's father, Lord Stark. He's dead. The words didn't register at first. Jon heard them but couldn't process them. His father, Ned Stark, the most honorable man in Westeros, the man who'd raised Jon and taught him everything about duty and honor, dead. How? Jon asked. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Joffrey ordered it. Against his mother's advice, against everyone's advice. The boy king wanted blood, so he took it. Daisy's expression was furious. This means war. Real war. No more negotiations. No more hoping for peace. The Lannisters killed the Warden of the North. They'll pay for it in blood. Jon nodded numbly. Then he stood and walked away from the camp, into the forest. Ghost followed silently. He walked until he couldn't see the camp anymore, until he was alone with the trees and the silence. Then he fell to his knees and let himself feel it. His father was dead, the man who'd protected him, who'd lied to keep him safe, who'd sacrificed his honor to shield Jon from a world that wanted him dead, gone, executed like a common criminal, and Jon hadn't been there. Hadn't said goodbye. Hadn't told Ned that he understood the sacrifice, that he was grateful, that he loved him despite everything. He'd broken his vows and deserted the Night's Watch to save this man. And he'd failed. Ghost pressed against him, warm and solid. Jon buried his face in the direwolf's fur and let himself break. When he finally returned to camp hours later, his eyes were red but dry. He found Robb's tent and entered without announcing himself. Robb sat at his campaign table, staring at nothing. Catelyn stood at the window, her back to the room, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Jon Robb said when he saw him, his voice was dead. "You heard. I heard. They killed him. They promised mercy, and they killed him anyway. Joffrey, that little bastard, he ordered it personally, had father dragged to the sept and beheaded in front of everyone." Robb's hands clenched into fists. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to march on King's Landing and kill every Lannister I can find. I'm going to burn that city to the ground." "No," Jon said quietly, "you're not." Robb looked up sharply. "What? Marching on King's Landing is suicide. It's what Tywin wants. He's baiting you, hoping you'll do something stupid in your grief so he can crush you in open battle." Jon moved closer. "Robb, I know what you're feeling. I feel it too. But we can't let anger make our decisions. We have to think. We have to be smart." "Smart?" Robb's voice rose. "They killed father. They killed him, and you want me to be smart?" "I want you to win," Jon shouted back. "I want you to actually defeat them, not throw your life away in a suicide charge. Father died because he was honorable in a dishonorable world. Don't make the same mistake." Silence fell. Catelyn turned from the window, her eyes red with tears, staring at Jon like she'd never seen him before. "What are you saying?" she asked quietly. "I'm saying we fight smart," Jon said. "We use guerrilla tactics. We hit their supply lines. We avoid open battle until we have overwhelming advantage. We make this war so costly for the Lannisters that they beg for peace." He looked at Robb. "And when we finally win, when we have Joffrey in chains, then you kill him. Slowly, painfully, in Father's name. But you do it from a position of strength, not desperation." Robb stared at him. Then, slowly, the fire in his eyes cooled. Grief remained, but it was tempered now. Controlled. "You're right," Robb said finally. "Gods help me, you're right. Father would have wanted us to win, to actually beat them. Not to die in a glorious but pointless charge." "So what do we do?" Catelyn asked. She looked between her son and the bastard she'd never wanted, and her expression was strange. Almost respectful. "We find their weaknesses," Robb said, strength returning to his voice. "We exploit them. We turn this war into a nightmare for the Lannisters." He looked at Jon. "I need you on this. Your tactical mind, your scouting skills. Help me plan this." "Always," Jon said. They spent the rest of the night planning. Jon, Robb, Catelyn, and the senior commanders. They mapped Lannister positions, identified supply routes, planned ambush points. Jon's training from the Night's Watch proved invaluable. He knew how to fight from a position of weakness, how to use terrain, how to make every casualty count, how to turn an army's strengths into vulnerabilities. By dawn, they had a plan. It was risky. It required precision. But it could work. "The fords," Jon said, pointing to the map. "There are 3 major crossings of the Red Fork. The Lannisters use them to move supplies from the Westerlands to Harrenhal. If we take those fords, if we deny them those crossings, we cut their supply line in half." "They'll be guarded," Lord Karstark said. "Of course they'll be guarded," Jon replied. "Which is why we don't attack directly. We use small forces, rangers, scouts, fast cavalry. We hit them at night, take the fords before they can reinforce. Hold them long enough to destroy the crossing infrastructure, then withdraw before their main army can respond." "That's a lot of moving parts," the great Jon rumbled. "A lot that could go wrong." "Yes," Jon agreed. "But if it works, we cripple their logistics. Force them to take longer routes. Give us breathing room to maneuver." Robb studied the map. "Who leads the attack?" "I do," Jon said immediately. Everyone turned to look at him. Catelyn's expression was shocked. Robb's was calculating. "Jon, you're a scout," Robb said. "Not a commander. This requires leading hundreds of men in coordinated strikes." "That's beyond." "I know tactics," Jon interrupted. "I know the terrain. I know how to fight outnumbered, and I'm expendable. If this goes wrong and the commander dies, it won't cripple the whole army. But if you send one of your senior lords and they die, that's a disaster." "He has a point," Lord Karstark said grudgingly. "The bastard's green, but he's got good instincts. And if the plan fails, no offense, boy, we can't afford to lose a bastard cousin more than we can afford to lose a true lord." Jon ignored the sting of that. It was true, after all. Robb looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you lead the raid. But Jon, be careful. Don't be a hero. Get in, destroy the fords, get out. Understand? I understand. The raid was set for 3 days hence. Jon spent those days preparing. Selecting men, studying terrain, drilling formations. He chose rangers and light cavalry, men who could move fast and fight hard, men who wouldn't panic under pressure. Olyvar Frey volunteered to join. So did Daisy Mormont. Jon accepted them both gratefully. The night before the raid, Robb pulled Jon aside. I'm trusting you with 300 men, Robb said. That's a lot of lives in your hands. I know. Jon, promise me you'll come back. Promise me I won't lose you too. Jon couldn't make that promise. War killed people. Even skilled fighters. Even lucky ones. But he could see the fear in his brother's eyes. The desperate need for reassurance. I'll do my best, Jon said. That's all I can promise. Robb embraced him fiercely. That's enough. Good luck, brother. The raid launched at midnight. 300 riders moving silently through the darkness, Ghost ranging ahead, Jon at their head. They split into 3 groups, 1 for each ford. Jon led the central assault himself. The Lannister guards never knew what hit them. Jon's rangers struck like wolves in the night, overwhelming the sentries before they could raise an alarm. The fords were taken in minutes. Then came the hard part, destroying the crossing infrastructure, burning boats, smashing docks, making the fords impassable. They had 2 hours before Lannister reinforcements could arrive from the nearest garrison. Jon worked his men hard, driving them to finish quickly. Ghost stood guard, the dire wolf's senses alert for approaching enemies. 1 hour passed. The western ford was destroyed. Another 30 minutes, the eastern ford fell. Just the central ford remained. Then Ghost growled, low in warning. They're coming, Jon said immediately. Everyone mount up. We're leaving. They withdrew in good order, the discipline Jon had drilled into them paying off. Behind them the fords burned. The crossings were impassable. The mission was a success, but Lannister cavalry appeared on the horizon. Hundreds of riders in crimson and gold, coming fast. Ride, Jon shouted. Back to camp, now. They ran. 300 Northerners racing through the night, Lannister cavalry in pursuit. Jon brought up the rear with Daisy and Olyvar, making sure no stragglers fell behind. An arrow hissed past Jon's ear. Another struck his saddle. The Lannisters were gaining. Jon, Daisy shouted. We need to split up. Divide their forces. Jon made the decision in a heartbeat. You and Olyvar take half the men west. I'll lead the rest north. Meet at the rendezvous point. They split. The Lannister cavalry hesitated, then divided as well. Half chased Daisy's group, half came after Jon. Ghost ran beside Jon's horse, the dire wolf's speed matching the mare's. Jon pushed his exhausted mount harder, knowing that if she faltered, he was dead. The chase lasted an hour. By the time Jon's group reached friendly territory, northern scouts waiting to cover their retreat, they'd lost the Lannisters in the darkness. Daisy's group arrived 20 minutes later, breathing hard but alive. Everyone accounted for? Jon asked. 2 dead, 5 wounded, Olyvar reported. Could have been a lot worse. It could have been. They'd struck deep into enemy territory, destroyed 3 strategic fords, and escaped with minimal losses. By any measure, it was a victory. They rode back to camp as heroes. The men cheered. Robb embraced Jon with genuine relief. Even Lord Karstark looked impressed. The bastard's got a future as a commander, Karstark said grudgingly. If he lives long enough. That night, alone in his tent, Jon let himself feel the weight of what he'd done. He'd led men into battle, had killed enemies with his own sword, had made decisions that cost 2 men their lives. This was war, not songs or stories, just blood and fear and impossible choices. And he'd chosen to be here, had deserted the Night's Watch for this. Ghost nuzzled his hand. Jon stroked the direwolf's head and tried not to think about whether he'd made the right choice. The Westerling Gambit victory at the fords brought Jon unexpected recognition. He'd proven himself in battle, demonstrated tactical acumen beyond his years, and earned the grudging respect of even the hardest northern lords. Robb elevated him to a formal command position, captain of scouts, with authority over all reconnaissance operations. It was dangerous visibility for someone trying to stay hidden, but Jon had little choice. Refusing the promotion would raise more questions than accepting it. Just keep your head down, Catelyn advised him privately the first time she'd spoken directly to him in weeks. Don't draw attention. Don't make speeches in war councils. Be competent but not memorable. I'll try, Jon said. See that you do. Her expression was still cool, but something had shifted. She looked at him now with calculation rather than contempt. You're useful to Robb. That matters more than I expected it would. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't acceptance. But it was acknowledgement, and from Catelyn Stark, that was almost revolutionary. The war ground on through summer's end into autumn. Robb's forces harried the Lannisters relentlessly, avoiding major battles but making every mile of Riverland's territory costly to hold. Tywin couldn't bring his superior numbers to bear if the northern forces refused to fight on his terms. It was working. Slowly. Expensively. But working. Then Robb made the mistake Jon had feared since that conversation weeks ago. Jon returned from a scouting mission to find the camp in turmoil. Lords arguing in the command tent, raised voices and accusations. He pushed through to find Robb standing alone against a wall of angry bannermen. You swore an oath, Lord Karstark was shouting. You promised to marry a Frey. And now you tell us you've married some Westerling girl? Have you lost your mind? Jon's blood turned to ice. No, it couldn't be. Robb's face was set, defiant despite the fear in his eyes. I married Jane Westerling 3 days ago. In secret, witnessed by a septon. It's done. It cannot be undone. It's treason against your own alliance, the great Jon roared. Walder Frey will never forgive this. You've destroyed everything we've built. I did what I had to do, Robb said, his voice rising. I slept with her, took her maidenhead. My honor demanded I marry her. Would you have me be like the Lannisters, taking what I want without consequence? Your honor? Karstark's voice dripped contempt. You're a king. Kings don't have the luxury of personal honor. You sacrificed thousands of men for one girl's maidenhead. Jon stood frozen in the tent's entrance. He'd warned Robb, had begged him not to do this, and Robb had done it anyway. Catelyn appeared at Jon's elbow, her face ashen. Did you know? She whispered. No. I warned him against it. Told him not to see her again. He promised. Robb hadn't actually promised, had only said he'd think about it. The arguing continued. Lords threatening to withdraw their support, Robb defending his choice with increasingly desperate rhetoric about honor and duty. It was a disaster. Everything Jon had feared coming to pass. Finally, the lords stormed out, leaving Robb alone with his mother and Jon. You're a fool, Catelyn said flatly. A noble, honorable fool, just like your father. I had no choice, Robb said, but his voice was uncertain now. I dishonored her. I had to make it right. You had a choice, Jon said quietly. You could have not slept with her, could have stayed away like I told you to. But you didn't. You chose desire over duty, and now we're all going to pay the price. Robb's face flushed. Don't lecture me about duty, Jon. You're a deserter. You broke your vows. You have no moral authority here. The words hit like a physical blow. Jon stepped back, stunned. Robb, Catelyn's voice was sharp. That's enough. No, it's not enough. Robb's anger was building, fed by guilt and fear. Jon deserted the Night's Watch for me, broke sacred vows, became a criminal, and now he stands there judging me for breaking a betrothal? At least what I did was honorable. At least I'm not hiding under a false name because the whole realm wants me dead. Jon felt something inside him go cold and hard. You're right, I'm a deserter, an oathbreaker. Everything you say is true. He met his brother's eyes. But I broke my vows to save you, to help you win this war. You broke yours for a girl you barely know, because you couldn't keep your cock in your pants. So yes, Robb, I judge you, and Father would too. Father's dead, Robb shouted. He's dead because his honor got him killed. Well, I won't apologize for being honorable too. Father's honor saved the realm, Jon shot back. What does your honor save? One girl's reputation? That's worth losing the war? Get out, Robb said, his voice shaking. Get out of my tent. Now. Jon left, walked through the camp in a daze, ghost at his heels. Behind him he heard Catelyn's voice raised in anger, berating Robb for his stupidity, but Jon couldn't process it. could only feel the weight of inevitability settling on his shoulders. The Red Wedding was coming. Maybe not in the exact form it took in the stories Jon half remembered from another life, but something like it. The Freys would betray them, the alliance would shatter. And Robb, stubborn, honorable, foolish Robb, had doomed them all for love. Jon found himself at the edge of camp, staring into the forest. He could run, take Ghost and disappear into the wilderness. He was already a deserter from the Night's Watch. Why not desert this doomed cause too? But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. Robb was his brother. Pack. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. Jon Stone. He turned. Catelyn stood behind him, her face drawn with exhaustion. My lady, walk with me. It wasn't a request. They walked in silence for several minutes, Ghost trailing behind. Finally, Catelyn spoke. You warned him about this? About the Westerling girl? Yes. And he didn't listen. No. Catelyn was quiet for a moment. I was wrong about you. Jon looked at her sharply. My lady, when you arrived at this camp, I saw you as a liability, a deserter who would bring nothing but trouble. I tolerated your presence because Robb demanded it, but I didn't want you here. She stopped walking, turned to face him. I was wrong, you've proven yourself. In battle, in council, in loyalty. You're the only person who's been honest with Robb when he needed to hear hard truths. That's worth more than I gave you credit for. I'm still a bastard, Jon said. Still a deserter. Yes. And you're also one of the few people in this camp I trust. Catelyn's expression was complex. I don't like you, Jon Snow. I probably never will. You remind me too much of Ned's betrayal, of the wife I thought I was, the honored lady with an honorable husband. But I respect you. And right now, with everything falling apart, respect is more valuable than affection. Jon didn't know what to say to that. The Freys will betray us, Catelyn continued. When they learn of the marriage, they'll pull their support. Probably worse. Walder Frey is a vindictive old man who never forgets a slight. Robb breaking the betrothal is more than a slight. It's a mortal insult. I know. Then we need to prepare. Need to have a plan for when it happens. She looked at him intently. I'm going to need your help, Jon. Your tactical mind. Your ability to see things clearly when everyone else is blinded by emotion. Can I count on you? Always, Jon said. For Robb. For the pack. For the pack, Catelyn echoed. For the first time since Jon had known her, she almost smiled at him. Come. We have work to do. The Frey's response. The raven from the twins arrived 5 days later. Lord Walder Frey's response to the broken betrothal was venomous. He withdrew all Frey forces from Robb's army immediately, nearly 4,000 men, a quarter of their strength. He declared the alliance void and announced that House Frey would remain neutral in the conflict. But the message contained something more, something that made Jon's blood run cold. The king in the north has proven himself an oathbreaker and a man without honor. He is not fit to rule. House Frey will not support traitors. However, in the interest of peace, I extend an invitation. Come to the twins, your grace. Explain yourself. Apologize. Perhaps we can find a way to salvage this disaster. But come soon, before my generosity expires. Lord Walder Frey of the Crossing. It's a trap, Jon said immediately. The War Council was assembled. Robb, Catelyn, the Great Jon, Lord Karstark, Edmure Tully, and a handful of other senior commanders. They've been debating the message for an hour. Of course it's a trap, Robb said tiredly. But what choice do I have? If I don't go, the Freys stay hostile. If I do go and apologize, maybe I can salvage something. You can't seriously be considering this, Jon said. Robb Walder Frey is inviting you into his stronghold after you insulted him. He controls both sides of the twins. He could seal the gates and murder you, and there's nothing we could do about it. He wouldn't dare, the Great Jon rumbled. Guest right is sacred. Even a snake like Walder Frey wouldn't violate guest right. Wouldn't he? Jon looked around the table. He's calling Robb an oathbreaker. A man without honor. If Robb has no honor, why should Walder? Maybe he figures turnabout is fair play. This is paranoid speculation, Lord Karstark said. The Freys are ambitious and greedy, but they're not stupid. Killing a king under guest right would make every house in Westeros their enemy. They'd be destroyed. Unless they have powerful friends, Catelyn said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Unless the Lannisters have made them an offer. Land. Titles. Rewards for betraying the North. Silence fell. The possibility hung in the air like poison. Mother's right, Robb said finally. Tywin is ruthless enough to orchestrate something like this. But that doesn't change the fact that I need to try. We're losing this war. We lost a quarter of our strength when the Freys pulled out. We can't afford to lose more. If there's even a chance of reconciliation. There isn't, Jon interrupted. Robb, you married Jane. You can't unmarry her. Walder Frey can't uninsult his daughters. There's no reconciliation possible. The best we can hope for is that he stays neutral instead of actively hostile, which is still better than having him as an enemy, Edmure Tully pointed out. The Lord of Riverrun was Catelyn's brother, newly elevated after his father's death. He was brave but impulsive. I agree with Robb. We have to try. Then send an envoy, Jon argued. Send Lord Karstark or the Great Jon, someone expendable. Don't walk into a potential trap yourself. I'm the king, Robb said. I'm the one who broke the oath. I'm the one who has to make amends. Sending someone else would be cowardice. Jon wanted to scream, wanted to grab his brother and shake sense into him. But he saw the determination in Robb's eyes and knew it was useless. Fine, Jon said. You go to the twins, but you take precautions. You bring a large force, enough to fight your way out if necessary. You keep scouts watching all approaches, and you have an escape plan ready if things go wrong. All of that, Robb agreed. But Jon, I'm going. That's final. The meeting dissolved. Jon left the tent feeling sick. This was how it ended. He could see it unfolding like a terrible prophecy. Robb would go to the twins, would try to apologize, and Walder Frey in league with Tywin Lannister would slaughter him. The Red Wedding. It had a different name here, a different context, but the result would be the same, unless Jon could prevent it. The conspiracy Jon spent the next 2 days in careful investigation. He couldn't voice his suspicions openly. No one would believe him. A bastard scout claiming the Freys were conspiring with the Lannisters based on nothing but instinct. They'd laugh him out of camp, but he could gather evidence, could watch, could listen. He deployed his scouts to watch the roads around the twins, sent men to infiltrate nearby villages and taverns, listening for rumors. Used every trick Arthur Dayne had never taught him, but that he'd learned anyway. How to be invisible, how to gather intelligence, how to see patterns others missed. 3 days before Robb's scheduled departure for the twins, Jon got confirmation. One of his scouts, a young man named Jax, returned with news. He'd been watching the roads near the twins and had seen something strange, Lannister messengers riding to the castle under cover of darkness. Not a large force, just a handful of riders with sealed messages. They went in through the western postern gate, Jax reported. The one the Freys use for smuggling and secret dealings. I couldn't get close enough to hear what was said, but my lord, those were Lannister men. Red cloaks under dark riding cloaks. I'd stake my life on it. Jon believed him. Jax was one of his best scouts, not given to exaggeration or seeing threats where none existed. Did anyone else see this? Jon asked. Just me and Olyvar. We were scouting together. Olyvar Frey, Walder Frey's son. One of the men who'd ridden with Jon, fought beside him, become something like a friend. And now Jon had to consider, was Olyvar part of the conspiracy, or an unwitting pawn? Where's Olyvar now? Back at his tent. He wanted to report this to the king immediately. I told him to let me bring it to you first, since you're our captain. Good. Jon thought quickly. Tell Olyvar to wait. Don't let him leave camp. I need to verify this before we bring it to the king. Jax nodded and left. Jon sat alone in his tent, ghost at his feet, and tried to think. Lannister messengers at the twins. Secret meetings. And now Robb was planning to ride straight into Walder Frey's castle with a force large enough to look threatening, but not large enough to actually fight the twins' garrison if it came to battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Jon had to convince Robb not to go. But how? His brother was stubborn, convinced his honor demanded he try to make amends. And the lords, most of them wanted Robb to go, either because they believed in reconciliation, or because they were tired of his judgment and wanted him to humble himself before the Freys. The only person who might listen was Catelyn. Jon found her in her tent, reviewing supply reports. She looked up as he entered. Jon. What is it? The twins, Jon said without preamble. It's a trap. I have proof. He told her everything. Jax's report, the Lannister messengers, the secret meetings. Catelyn listened with a face like stone, her expression growing darker with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. This is based on one scout's observation, she said finally. Lannister messengers could have been there for any number of reasons. Trade negotiations, prisoner exchanges. It doesn't necessarily mean— It means exactly what it looks like, Jon interrupted. Lady Catelyn, I know you don't trust my judgment. I know I'm just a bastard scout with no formal training. But I'm begging you, don't let Robb go to the twins. It's a trap. The Freys are going to kill him. Catelyn studied him. Why are you so certain? Because I've seen this story before, Jon wanted to say. Because in another life, in another world, this exact thing happened and Robb died and the North fell and everything went to hell. But he couldn't say that. So instead, because it's what I would do if I were Tywin Lannister. I've lost every battle against Robb in the field. My armies are being bled white by northern raiders. I can't win militarily. But politically? Robb just handed me a perfect opportunity. He broke an oath. Insulted a powerful ally. Made himself vulnerable. If I were Tywin, I'd exploit that immediately. Offer Walder Frey the world, land, titles, revenge, in exchange for killing the king in the north. It's brilliant. It's ruthless. And it's exactly what's happening. Catelyn stared at him. For the first time since Jon had known her, she looked uncertain. If you're right, she said slowly, then we need proof. Real proof. Something we can show Robb and the lords that will convince them not to go. How do we get that? We infiltrate the twins. Send someone in to confirm what the Freys are planning. Catelyn's mind was racing now. Jon could see it. Someone they won't suspect. Someone who can get close to Walder Frey's inner circle. That's suicide, Jon said. Anyone we send would be walking into the same trap as Robb. Not if they're already supposed to be there. Catelyn looked at him intently. Olyvar Frey. He's one of Walder's sons. He serves in our army, but he's still a Frey. If he went back to the twins, claimed he was visiting family before the king's arrival, he could gather intelligence without raising suspicion. Jon's stomach sank. You want to send Olyvar, one of my scouts, one of my friends? Do you have a better idea? He didn't. And the worst part was, it made sense. Olyvar was friendly with Jon, loyal to Robb, and young enough that his father might not suspect him of espionage. He could get inside the twins, listen to conversations, find evidence of the conspiracy, or he could be part of the conspiracy himself, and this would just warn the Freys that their plan was discovered. What if Olyvar is part of it? Jon asked. What if he tells his father we suspect something? Then we know we're right and we prepare accordingly, Catelyn said. But I don't think he is. I've watched him. He's genuinely loyal to Robb, genuinely horrified by what his father's done. If we approach him correctly, I think he'll help us. Jon didn't have a better option, and time was running out. All right, he said, but I approach him. He's my man, my friend. If this goes wrong, I want it on my head, not yours. Catelyn nodded. But Jon, be careful. If Olyvar is part of this, and he warns his father, you'll be the first person they come for. I know. Jon found Olyvar Frey in his tent, pacing nervously. The young man looked up when Jon entered. Jon, thank the gods. Jax told me to wait, but I need to report to the king. Those Lannister messengers— I know, Jon said. I've already informed Lady Catelyn. She's investigating. But Olyvar, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Olyvar's expression turned wary. What? Your father. What's he planning? Really planning? I don't know what you— Olyvar. Jon's voice was hard. I saw the messengers. I know something's happening, and I need to know if you're part of it or if you're on our side. Olyvar stared at him. Then slowly, he sank onto his camp bed, his face in his hands. My father is a monster, he said quietly. He's angry about the broken betrothal, furious. He sees it as the ultimate insult, and he's been in contact with the Lannisters, with Tywin himself. I don't know the details. Father doesn't trust me enough to include me in his inner circle. But Jon, I think he's planning something terrible. The king's visit to the twins, Jon said. It's a trap. I think so. Gods help me, I think you're right. Olivar looked up, his eyes desperate. What do? We need proof. Solid proof. Something we can show Robb that will convince him not to go. Jon sat beside him. Olivar, I need you to go back to the twins. Pretend you're visiting family. Get close to your father's councils. Find out exactly what's being planned. That's espionage. Against my own house. Olivar's voice shook. If father finds out, he'll kill you. I know. I wouldn't ask if there was another way. Jon met his eyes. But Olivar, if we don't stop this, Robb dies. Probably everyone who goes with him. And the North loses the war. Is that what you want? No. Gods, no. Olivar stood, began pacing again. All right, I'll do it. I'll go back. I'll find proof. But Jon, if I don't come back, if something goes wrong, tell Robb I was loyal. Tell him I tried. I will, Jon promised. But you're coming back. You're going to succeed. You're going to save the king's life. Olivar left for the twins the next morning, riding under the pretense of visiting family before the king's formal arrival. Jon watched him go and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. He'd just sent a friend, possibly to his death, based on nothing but instinct and one scout's report. If he was wrong, if this wasn't a conspiracy, he'd destroyed Oliver's relationship with his family for nothing. But if he was right, if this was the Red Wedding waiting to happen, then Olivar was their only chance of preventing it. All Jon could do now was wait. The truth unveiled. Olivar returned 4 days later, haggard and terrified. He rode into camp after dark, his horse nearly dead from being pushed too hard. Jon was waiting. He'd been watching the roads obsessively since Olivar left. Jon, Olivar gasped as he dismounted. Get the king. Get Lady Catelyn. Now, it's worse than we thought. They assembled in Robb's tent within minutes. Robb, Catelyn, Jon, the great Jon, and Lord Karstark. Olivar stood before them, swaying with exhaustion, and told them everything. It's a trap, he said without preamble. Father's in league with Tywin Lannister. They're planning to murder the king and everyone who comes with him to the twins. They're calling it justice, punishment for the broken oath, but it's just murder dressed up as righteousness. Silence. Robb's face had gone white. The great Jon's hand dropped to his sword. Lord Karstark looked stunned. How do you know this? Robb asked quietly. I heard father discussing it. He was drunk, thought I was loyal, let me sit in on a council with his most trusted sons. Jon, it's all planned out. The king arrives for the feast. Guest right is observed. Bread and salt, the whole thing. But once the feast is underway, once everyone's drunk and off guard, father's men seal the exits. They attack, kill everyone. Then they deliver the king's body to Tywin Lannister as proof of loyalty. In exchange, father gets Riverrun, gets to be Lord Paramount of the Trident, gets everything he's ever wanted. Guest right, Catelyn whispered. He would violate guest right. The gods will curse him for that. He doesn't care, Olivar said. He said the gods favor the strong, that history is written by winners, that 1,000 years from now, no one will remember the details. They'll just remember that House Frey rose from the crossing to rule the Riverlands. Robb stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. We're not going. Obviously. We're not walking into that slaughterhouse. Agreed, the great Jon rumbled. We kill every Frey we can find instead, starting with Walder himself. Wait, Jon said. If we don't go, if we just refuse the invitation, the Freys will know we discovered their plan. They'll barricade the twins. We'll lose access to the crossing permanently. Our forces will be cut off from the north. Then what do you suggest? Lord Karstark demanded. We let them murder our king? No. We turn the trap around. Jon moved to the campaign table, studying the map. The Freys are expecting us to walk in blind and trusting. What if we don't? What if we come prepared for battle? Bring our full force. Not just an honor guard, but the entire army. Surround the twins. And then, when they try to spring their trap, we spring ours instead. That's risky, Catelyn said. If we're wrong, if this isn't actually a trap, we'll start a war with the Freys over nothing. We're not wrong, Olivar said desperately. I heard it myself, saw the Lannister gold they're being paid. This is real. Robb looked at each of them in turn. Finally, his eyes settled on Jon. You warned me, he said quietly. About Jane, about the consequences. I didn't listen. I was a fool. But I'm listening now. Jon, what do you really think we should do? Jon took a breath. This was the moment. The hinge point where the story could go a different way. We don't go to the twins at all, he said. We find another crossing. Force a different route. It'll take longer, cost more, but we survive. We keep the army intact. We keep you alive. That's more important than pride or vengeance or maintaining access to one bridge. But the Freys will know we discovered their plan, Robb said. Let them know. Let the whole realm know. Send ravens to every major house detailing what Walder Frey tried to do, violating guest right, conspiring with the Lannisters, planning to murder a king under sacred protection. Even houses that don't like us will be horrified. The Freys will be pariahs. Tywin's alliance with them will be a liability, not an asset. The Great Jon nodded slowly. The bastard's right. We make Walder Frey toxic, untouchable. Even the Lannisters will have to distance themselves from a man who violates guest right. And we survive, Catelyn added. We keep fighting. That's what matters. Robb looked at the map for a long time. Finally, he nodded. All right, we don't go to the twins. We find another route, and we make sure everyone knows what Walder Frey tried to do. He looked at Olyvar. You saved my life. The whole army. I won't forget that. Olyvar bowed his head. I'm a Frey by blood, your grace, but I'm a Northman by choice. I serve the king in the north. Then you'll be rewarded, Robb said. When this war is won, you'll have lands, a title. Everything your father denied you by being a younger son. They spent the rest of the night planning. A new route south that avoided the twins entirely. Longer, harder, but survivable. Ravens to be sent at dawn exposing the Frey Lannister conspiracy. Preparations for the long march. Jon left the tent feeling lighter than he had in weeks. They'd done it. They'd averted the Red Wedding. Robb would live. The North would survive. But as he walked back to his own tent, Ghost pressed against his leg, Jon felt a nagging worry. They'd avoided one disaster, but the war was far from over. And every choice had consequences. What new catastrophes were they walking into by avoiding this one? The long march. The army broke camp 2 days later and began the long march south via an alternate route. It added 3 weeks to their journey and forced them to cross rough terrain, but it kept them away from the twins and Walder Frey's treachery. The ravens had been sent, exposing the conspiracy to every major house in Westeros. The response was everything Jon had hoped for. Universal condemnation of House Frey, even from traditional Lannister allies who were horrified by the violation of guest right. Tywin Lannister denied any involvement, of course. Called it Frey madness. But the damage was done. House Frey was isolated, toxic, their reputation destroyed. The march itself was grueling. Autumn rains turned roads to mud. Supplies ran low. Men deserted in small numbers, worn down by months of war with no end in sight. Morale suffered. But they were alive. And they were together. Jon rode with the scouts, ranging ahead of the main column, watching for threats. Ghost hunted in the forests, bringing down deer and elk that supplemented their dwindling supplies. The direwolf had grown enormous now, larger than any normal wolf had a right to be, more like a small horse than a canine. People whispered about him, about the white wolf that hunted with the king in the North's forces, about Jon Snow, the mysterious bastard cousin who'd appeared from nowhere and become one of Robb's most trusted commanders. The whispers worried Jon. Too much attention. Too many people asking questions about his past. Sooner or later, someone would put the pieces together, would recognize him as Jon Snow, the Night's Watch deserter. And then, Jon. He turned. Daisy Mormont rode up beside him, her expression serious. We need to talk, privately. They rode apart from the column, into a small copse of trees. Ghost ranged nearby, providing security. Daisy dismounted and faced Jon directly. I know who you are, she said without preamble. Jon's blood turned to ice. Don't insult me by lying. Daisy's voice was hard. I've been watching you for months now. The way you move, the way you think, the way you're so damn good at everything despite supposedly being a green recruit. And then there's the wolf, the white wolf. I've heard stories about Lord Stark's bastard who went to the Night's Watch. About Jon Snow who found a white direwolf pup. About the deserter who fled south. Jon said nothing. His hand drifted to his sword. I'm not going to turn you in, Daisy said. If I wanted to, I would have done it already. But Jon, others are starting to suspect too. Lord Karstark asked me yesterday if I knew anything about your past. The Great Jon's been making comments about how you fight like you've had professional training. People are curious. And curiosity is dangerous. What do you want? Jon asked quietly. I want you to be careful, to stay low, to not draw more attention than you already have. Daisy stepped closer. You're valuable to the king, to the cause. I don't want to lose you to some zealot who thinks deserters should hang regardless of circumstances. So be smart, be cautious, and for God's sake, don't do anything heroic that gets you noticed. I'll try, Jon said. See that you do. Daisy mounted her horse. And Jon, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Deserting to help your family, some oaths are worth breaking. She rode off before Jon could respond. That night, Jon lay awake in his tent, staring at the canvas ceiling. Daisy knew, which meant others probably suspected. The fiction of Jon Snow was crumbling. Sooner or later, the truth would come out. And when it did, Jon would have to face the consequences of his desertion. The Night's Watch demanded justice. The Northern Lords demanded honor. And Jon had neither to offer. He'd broken his vows for love of family, had become everything he'd been taught to despise, and now he'd have to live with that reality until the day someone put a sword through his heart for it. Ghost pressed against him, warm and solid. Jon rested his hand on the direwolf's head and tried to find some measure of peace. He didn't find it. The tide turns the alternate route brought them to the Westerlands by late autumn. Robb's strategy shifted. Instead of trying to relieve Riverrun or engage Tywin directly, they struck at the Lannister homeland itself, raided gold mines, burned supply depots, harried small folk, and destroyed infrastructure. It was brutal, effective, and it worked. Tywin was forced to divide his forces, part to defend the Westerlands, part to maintain his position at Harrenhal. The strategic initiative shifted to the north. For the first time in months, they were winning. Jon participated in raid after raid, his rangers striking deep into enemy territory and withdrawing before Lannister forces could respond. He became known as the Ghost Commander, named for his direwolf and his ability to appear from nowhere, strike, and vanish. The legend grew. So did the questions about his identity. It came to a head 3 months into the Westerlands campaign. Jon returned from a raid to find Robb's tent surrounded by guards. Something was wrong. He approached cautiously, Ghost at his side. The king wants to see you, one of the guards said. His tone was hostile. Now! Jon entered to find not just Robb, but a full assembly. Catelyn, the Great Jon, Lord Karstark, Edmure Tully, and standing in the center, looking both angry and disappointed, was a man Jon recognized from descriptions but had never met. Sir Brynden Tully? The Blackfish, Catelyn's uncle, one of the most respected military commanders in the Riverlands. Jon Snow, the Blackfish said. Or should I say Jon Snow? The words fell like a hammer. Jon felt every eye in the tent turn to him. I don't know what he started. Don't. The Blackfish's voice was sharp. I fought alongside your father Ned at the Trident. I knew him well. And you have his face, his eyes, his mannerisms. I'd know Ned Stark's son anywhere, bastard or not. He stepped closer. You're Jon Snow, the Night's Watch deserter, the oathbreaker who fled south. Aren't you? Jon looked at Robb. His brother's expression was anguished. Catelyn looked resigned. The other lords looked furious. There was no point in lying anymore. Yes, Jon said quietly. I'm Jon Snow. I deserted the Night's Watch to help my brother fight this war. I'm an oathbreaker. A deserter. Everything you think I am. Lord Karstark exploded. You harbored a deserter. A criminal. Do you have any idea what this does to our cause? To our honor? I know exactly what it does, Robb said, his voice steady. And I don't care. Jon has served loyally, fought bravely, saved my life multiple times. Whatever he was, whatever oaths he broke, he's earned his place here. The law is the law, Karstark shot back. Deserters hang. That's not opinion, it's fact. If we don't execute him, we're no better than the Lannisters who ignore laws when convenient. Then I'm no better than the Lannisters, Robb said flatly, because I won't execute my brother. I won't kill the man who's done more for this cause than half the lords in this tent. Your Grace? The Great Jon started. No. Robb stood, his voice ringing with authority. I am the king in the north. My word is law. And I say Jon Snow has earned a pardon. His desertion is forgiven. His oath-breaking is absolved. He's a free man and a valued member of my army. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. Silence. The lords stared at their young king, and Jon saw them truly understand what they'd crowned. Not a boy, not a puppet, a king, someone willing to stand by his decisions even when they were unpopular. Finally, Lord Karstark shook his head. You're making a mistake. But you're the king. I'll follow your orders. The great Jon grunted agreement. Edmure Tully nodded. One by one, the lords accepted Robb's decision. Only the Blackfish looked unmoved. He studied Jon for a long moment, then spoke. Jon Snow, you broke sacred vows to help your family. That takes courage, or stupidity. I'm not sure which. He paused. But you fought well, led well, so I'll accept the king's pardon. But know this, you're not off the wall's hooks. If we survive this war, the Night's Watch will still want your head. The king's pardon only goes so far. I understand, Jon said quietly. The meeting dispersed. Jon left the tent feeling exposed, raw. His secret was out. Everyone knew what he was now. There would be consequences. There always were. But he was alive, and Robb had stood by him. That had to count for something. That night, Catelyn found him at the edge of camp, staring into the darkness. You knew, Jon said without turning around. You knew this would come out eventually. I did. Catelyn stood beside him. And I knew Robb would pardon you. He loves you, more than is probably wise. I've brought nothing but trouble to this cause. You've brought tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty, Catelyn corrected. The trouble was already here. You just added complications. She paused. Jon, I'm not going to pretend we're friends, or that I've forgiven Ned for whatever indiscretion created you. But you've proven yourself. To me. To everyone. That matters. Does it? Will it matter when the Watch sends rangers to collect my head? Cross that bridge when you come to it, Catelyn said. For now, focus on surviving this war. Everything else is tomorrow's problem. She left. Jon stood alone in the darkness, ghost pressed against his leg, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. The endgame. The war ground on through winter's approach. With Jon's identity revealed but pardoned, he operated more openly. Led larger forces. Took command of entire wings of Robb's army. The lords accepted him grudgingly. He was too useful to discard over ancient grudges about oath-breaking. The Westerlands campaign succeeded beyond expectations. Tywin was forced to withdraw from Harrenhal to defend his homeland, giving the Riverlands breathing room. Robb's forces captured several important Lannister strongholds. The tide was turning. Then news arrived from King's Landing that changed everything. Tyrion Lannister had seized control of the city. Joffrey was under house arrest. The realm was fracturing. And Tyrion, cunning, pragmatic Tyrion, was sending peace offers. The proposal was simple. The North could have its independence. Tywin would recognize Robb as king in the North in exchange for ending hostilities. Sansa would be returned safely. The war would end. It was everything they'd fought for. Everything they'd bled for. Victory. But there were conditions. The North would have to execute Jon Snow as proof of commitment to law and order. An oath-breaker and deserter could not be pardoned without consequences. Jon read the terms and felt cold settle into his bones. Of course it came down to this. His life in exchange for northern independence. His death to buy Robb's kingdom. It was a fair trade. One life for thousands. One bastard deserter for peace and freedom. He knew what he had to do. No, Robb said when Jon tried to explain. Absolutely not. I won't execute you to please Tyrion Lannister. You have to, Jon said quietly. They were alone in Robb's tent, just the two of them. Brothers talking honestly. Robb, this is everything we fought for. Don't throw it away for me. I'm not executing my brother. Robb's voice was anguished. Jon, you came here because I needed you. You broke your vows for me. I'm not going to repay that by putting your head on a spike. Then you're condemning thousands of people to more war, Jon said. More death, more suffering. All to save one person who knew the price when he made his choice. I don't care about the price. I care about you. Then be a king, not a brother. Jon met Robb's eyes. Father would have done it, would have made the hard choice. You know he would. Father's dead because he was too honorable, Robb shouted. I won't make the same mistake. They argued for hours. Catelyn joined them, tried to find a compromise. The Great Jon offered to fight the entire Lannister army himself to avoid this choice, but the mathematics were inescapable. Tyrion's offer was generous. Refusing it meant more war, more death, more risk that everything would fall apart. And all it cost was one bastard's life. In the end, Jon made the choice for them. 3 days before Robb was supposed to send his response to King's Landing, Jon wrote a letter, left it on Robb's desk. Then he took Ghost and rode away from camp in the pre-dawn darkness. The letter was simple. Robb, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I'm riding to King's Landing to surrender myself to the Lannisters. By giving them what they want, my head, you can have what you need. Peace. It's a fair trade. Don't follow me. Don't try to stop this. You're a king now. Kings make sacrifices. Today I'm making one for you. I don't regret deserting the Night's Watch. I don't regret any of it. Getting to fight beside you, to help you, to be your brother when it mattered, that was worth every consequence. Win this war. Build your kingdom. Be the king father would have been proud of. Ghost is with me. He deserves better than to watch me die, but I can't leave him behind. We're pack. We die together. I love you, brother. Jon rode south for 2 days before Robb's forces caught up to him. He was camped in a forest clearing, Ghost lying beside him, when he heard horses approaching. A dozen riders, Robb at their head. Jon stood, facing his brother. You shouldn't have come. You're an idiot, Robb said, dismounting. His face was streaked with tears. A brave, stupid, loyal idiot. Did you really think I'd let you throw your life away? It's my life to throw away, it's not. Robb crossed to him, gripped his shoulders. Jon, I need you. The North needs you. You're not just a sacrifice to be traded. You're my brother, my friend, my best commander. I can't do this without you. You can, you will. Jon's voice was steady. Robb, take the peace. Accept Tyrion's terms. Give them what they want. I'll face whatever comes. It's the right choice. It's not the only choice. Robb's voice was desperate now. We can keep fighting. We can win without giving you up. Jon, please. And how many men die for that pride? Jon asked quietly. How many mothers lose sons? How many children lose fathers? Robb, you're a king. Act like one. Make the hard choice. Let me go. They stood there in the forest clearing, brother facing brother, and Jon saw the moment Robb broke. I hate this, Robb whispered. I hate everything about this, but you're right. You're always right. It's the smart choice. The king's choice. He pulled Jon into a fierce embrace. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For dragging you into this war. For getting you killed. You didn't drag me anywhere, Jon said. I chose this. Every step, and I'd choose it again. They held each other for a long moment. Then Robb stepped back. I'm coming with you, to King's Landing. I won't let you face this alone. No, Jon said firmly. You're staying here. You're building your kingdom. You're living. That's my price. That's what I want my death to buy. Robb looked like he wanted to argue more. But finally, he nodded. All right, Jon. I'll let you go. But know this, you're a hero. To me, to the North, to everyone who fights under our banner, your name won't be forgotten. I'll make sure of that. I'm just a bastard who broke his vows, Jon said. You're the man who saved the king in the North, Robb corrected. Your pack. Always pack, Jon echoed. They made camp together that night. Robb's men built fires, cooked food, tried to pretend this wasn't a funeral vigil. Jon sat with his brother and they talked about everything and nothing. About Winterfell, about childhood, about father and the family they'd lost. At dawn, Jon mounted his horse. Ghost stood beside him. The great white wolf looking at Robb with eyes that held something like accusation. Take care of him, Robb said to the dire wolf. Keep him safe as long as you can. Ghost's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, just acknowledgement. Jon rode south, alone except for Ghost. Toward King's Landing? Toward Tyrion Lannister? Toward whatever justice or mercy awaited a deserter who'd broken his vows for love. He didn't look back. Couldn't bear to see his brother standing there, watching him ride to his death, but he felt Robb's eyes on him until the forest swallowed him whole. Epilogue. The Bastard's Legacy. Jon Snow arrived at King's Landing on a gray autumn morning, riding through gates that had seen the execution of his father months before. Tyrion Lannister met him in the throne room, not on the Iron Throne but standing before it, looking up at the hideous monument to Aegon's conquest. "Jon Snow," Tyrion said. "The deserter who became a hero. The oathbreaker who saved the North. You're an interesting contradiction." "I'm a dead man walking," Jon said flatly. "Let's not pretend otherwise." "Perhaps," Tyrion studied him, "or perhaps not. You see, I made that demand, your execution, because I needed to see what kind of king your brother is. Would he sacrifice you for peace? Or would he throw away everything for sentiment?" "He would have sacrificed me," Jon said. "I didn't give him the choice. I came here voluntarily." "Yes, I know, which tells me everything I need to know about you both." Tyrion smiled slightly. "Jon Snow, I'm not going to execute you." Jon stared at him. "What? Oh, the Night's Watch wants you dead. The laws demand it. But I'm pragmatic. You're worth more alive than dead, so here's my offer. You go to the Wall. You resume your vows. You serve the Watch for the rest of your life. Properly this time, no more running south to save family. In exchange, the North gets its independence. Robb keeps his kingdom. Everyone wins. The Watch will execute me the moment I arrive," Jon said. "Not if I send a royal pardon with you. Not if I make it clear that you served the realm by helping end the war." Tyrion's expression was serious now. "Jon Snow, the real war isn't in the south. It's in the north, beyond the Wall. I've heard reports. Dead things walking. Winter coming. The realm needs the Night's Watch strong. Needs defenders on the Wall who actually know how to fight. You're one of those defenders. So go back, serve properly this time, and help save the world from whatever's coming." Jon thought about it. Thought about the Wall, about the cold and the duty and the endless watch, about spending the rest of his life in black, defending the realm from threats most people didn't believe existed. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't glory. But it was purpose. And it was life. "All right," Jon said finally. "I'll go back to the Wall. I'll serve. I'll keep my vows this time." "Good man." Tyrion extended his hand. "Save the world, Jon Snow. That's all I ask." Jon took the hand, shook it, and felt the weight of his choices settling finally into something like acceptance. He was Jon Snow, deserter, oathbreaker, hero, dead man walking who'd been given an impossible second chance. He would return to the Wall, would face whatever judgment awaited, would spend the rest of his life in service to a cause bigger than family or honor or personal desire. And when the darkness came, when the real war finally arrived, he would be ready. Because that's what bastards did. They endured. They served. They died in the shadows so that others could live in the light. Jon Snow rode north with Ghost at his side, toward the Wall and whatever destiny awaited him there. And the realm, saved by a deserter's sacrifice, would never know how close it had come to falling.